What do you think of when you hear abolition? If you think about burning buildings and scenes from the Purge, I don't blame you. After all, we live in a society that centers itself around police and prisons as a solution to everything. We're basically this guy from Parks and Rec.
You're stealing, right to jail. You're playing music too loud, right to jail, right away. You're driving too fast, jail. Slow, jail.
First, let's talk about what abolition is. Abolition isn't anarchy. Prisons aren't demolished instantly, and cops don't cease to exist immediately. As much as it would be nice for it to work out this way, it's idealistic to view this as a possibility. Because of how ingrained these systems are in society, there needs to be a gradual change. And even then, it doesn't stop at just getting rid of our current systems, it's about creating new systems centered on community to take their place. Ruth Wilson Gilmore puts it like this: abolition is about presence, not absence. It's about building life-affirming institutions. Before we talk about steps we can take toward abolition, let's talk about the why, aka the realities of police and prisons. We're told that police and prisons maintain the safety of society, but do they really do any of these? Police patrol under the slogan protect and serve, but how can they protect individuals when their main course of action happens after the supposed crime? They don't stop crime from happening, they seek retribution after the fact and are heavily biased in doing so. Let's first talk about just a few statistics about police discrimination. According to Ravi Shroff of NYU, black drivers were 20% more likely to be stopped in comparison to white drivers, and when stopped, they were subject to searches 1.5 to 2 times the rate that white drivers were. Interestingly enough, this 20% was reduced at night when it was harder for the police to discern race. Police are also acting more and more like they're the judge, jury, and executioner, as police shootings are on the rise according to the Washington Post. According to Mapping Police Violence, black Americans are 2.9 times more likely to be killed by police than white people. We also need to talk about wrongful convictions. According to the Georgia Innocence Project, 4 to 6% of those incarcerated are innocent, with innocent black Americans being more likely to be arrested than white people. Also, due to media portrayals of cops, we tend to believe that cops are great at solving crime. However, Pew Research reports that less than half of crimes committed are reported to cops, and of that already low number, less than half of those are actually cleared. Let's shift the focus now to prisons. The institutions we are told keep us safe by punishing so-called violent criminals and keeping them off the street until they serve their time. But there are tons of issues with this statement. First, we can talk about how the prison system has discriminate impacts on people of color, with them having higher incarceration rates in comparison with white people. We can also talk about how the breakdown of crimes people are in prisons and jails for may not be what it seems. For example, a large amount of people in jail haven't even been convicted of a crime yet. They might just not have been able to pay their bail. It's also important to think more critically of the crime makeup in prisons. We are often told, and as shown in this chart, that violent offenders make up a large amount of individuals in prison. Remember that individuals who commit a violent crime are given longer sentences, so as those who commit crimes with a lesser sentencing time are released, the same violent offenders remain. Michelle Alexander offers a great hypothetical scenario in her book, The New Jim Crow, that visualizes the error in this. Paraphrased, imagine that there is a prison hall with 10 cells on each side. One side is kept only for short-term sentences, while the other side is given to those who have longer sentences. One side will always be cycling out, while the other will contain the same people more or less. Now, at any given time, you can make the bad faith argument that this prison is made up of half violent offenders, so there must be a lot of violent crime happening. This completely ignores the effect that individuals cycling through the prison systems have on the makeup of prison statistics. Also, just because an individual serves their time doesn't mean they are done being affected by the carceral system and surveillance. The carceral environment is terrible for mental health, and it instills feelings of isolation as well as takes away a lack of purpose. Individuals in prison may also witness dramatic moments often. These could lead to depression, anxiety, PTSD, etc., which could persist long after being released from prison. There's also collateral consequences that come from being incarcerated. One of these consequences is taking away an individual's right to vote. Individuals released from prison may also find it difficult to find housing and a job. Deva Pager's Mark of a Criminal Record does an excellent job of displaying this, using 2 pairs, one black, one white, and within these pairs they switched off on who had the criminal record. These pairs were similar in everything else that could affect whether they received a callback in an interview. Shown by the graph is the drastic effect that a criminal record has on reducing the likelihood of a callback from employers. The previous points I have made are easy to address with the reformist attitude, but it stops short of asking the real question about why we do any of this to begin with. Just because someone commits a crime, should they have to live in inhumane conditions such as a building that retains heat, has no AC, overcrowding, and terrible labor conditions, etc.? And let's also ask ourselves this: what does punishment do? It doesn't benefit society as a whole. We are told often that prisons serve as a deterrent. But if that's true, why is it that as imprisonment rates go up, crime doesn't go down? An interesting point to be made here is that when COVID caused prisons to release some of their prisoners, 11,000 people were released and only 17 of them committed a crime after being released. Only one of those was an assault. The rest were just drug charges or other minor offenses. It's time to realize that prisons serve as a method of disenfranchising individuals and separating those seen as undesirable by capital from society. Now that we've looked at police and prisons in a nutshell, let's talk about how abolition is achieved. I'm not going to sit here and tell y'all to vote. After all, there is no party that actually supports these policies. We've heard time and time again that Democrats want to defund police or that they've already defunded police, but this isn't the reality. Just listen to Biden himself.
When it comes to public safety in this nation, the answer is not defund the police, it's fund the police. Fund the police.
Change will be made through community organizing, not a false democratic promise. We should be supporting programs to defund police and putting that money towards community-centered programs like after-school programs, mental health programs, better funding of schools, and funding homes for the unhoused. It's about targeting factors that may lead to crime rather than focusing on how to punish individuals, which doesn't solve the problem. You might be asking yourself if we even have the money for all of this. The answer is yes. For one example, the Corporation for Supportive Housing estimates that housing all of the unhoused in California and funding interventions for them is estimated to cost $8.1 billion annually over 12 years, while California spent $14 billion just this past year on their police budget. Mariame Kaba also has a great list in her book, We Do This Till We Free Us, on how to evaluate reforms and reforms that we should strive to support on the path to abolition. The idea is to not argue for reforms like hiring more cops of color or more body cams, because despite them having already been proven not to work, they continue to pump money into a flawed system. This money could go elsewhere. Of course, we also have to recognize that these issues with our system are not capable of being reformed. They're working just as capitalism intended them to work. Thus, we need to recognize the need to change the system as a whole. Abolition without recognizing the problem of capitalism allows capitalism to undo any changes by seeping back in. This was just a quick rundown. The field of abolition is very large, and my goal is to make short videos that will talk about these issues in a short span of time, with the hope of encouraging viewers to engage in further research themselves. Most of the viewpoints I talk about come from the following books, which I highly recommend. With all of that being said, I hope y'all learned something or have at least begun to think about abolition as a reality.